Hi everyone, my name is Kira, I'm an English teacher, and in this short video we're going to be looking at a breakdown of a question B essay. So that's from section 1 of paper 1. It's the question B which follows the comprehension, and this one is an opinion piece from 2017. So let's have a quick look here. So we have the sample here on the left. You can ignore where it says speech. It is in fact an opinion piece, and there are some similarities anyway, but there's some really interesting features that make it an opinion piece, and obviously, as I mentioned, it's the 50 mark, so it's kind of like a mini composition, which can be very similar to the composition, the essay section further along on paper 1, but it's that bit shorter. So we're going to look at the question itself, we're going to break it down. Then we're going to look at the introduction, and then we'll be looking at the main body, which is sort of two main arguments or two main points done into two paragraphs, and then look at the conclusion from there. Okay, so breaking down the question, first thing we have to do, we have to make sure we know exactly what is required of us in the question and how we're going to approach our answer so we can maximize our marks. So the views people hold today are often influenced by the news and information they receive from the online world of the internet and social media. Couldn't be truer. Really relevant, really topical statement. Lots to say about. Okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty part. Well, I always say at this point, mind the gap, GAP. So the first one is genre. G for genre, A for audience, and P for purpose. We're going to have a break down this question in that way. So it says write an opinion piece. So really our genre is opinion piece. So again, we should straight away be thinking about the language and the type of register maybe that's relevant for an opinion piece, the kinds of features, maybe the kind of style we're going to be writing in. These are things that should be going through your mind as we're starting this. Now, the second thing is the audience, and this is an opinion piece for publication in a national newspaper. So that's really important to figure out, who is going to be reading this piece, who are we targeting, who's our audience, so that we can, adjust our style or maybe just our tone or use language that's appropriate. Now, this is a national newspaper, so I would suggest a more formal, a fairly serious tone as well. It's not a local paper, it's not a kind of a smaller newsletter. This is a wider audience, a wider readership, so keeping it fairly formal. Okay, and finally then the purpose. Well, what is your purpose? What are you doing, or why are you doing it? Well, we know we're writing the opinion piece, we know who we're writing it for, and ultimately it's giving your view. So it's an opinion basically. So what is your opinion? So you have a lot of freedom there as well, but it's always really important to know exactly what your purpose is, and that links in well with the P in the purpose marks in the marking scheme as well. So the examiner is always saying, do you know what your purpose is, and are you achieving that purpose? Okay, so jumping in then to the introduction, and let's have a look. It's really nicely laid out, a nice start to it as well. And what I thought was an interesting kind of link here in the opening was the vocabulary. So, using this opening quote, the word sheep is mentioned, but then sheep is mentioned again further on in the paragraph, and then the opinion of the flock is mentioned again. So sometimes it's nice to sort of, if you're using like a phrase or a quote or some sort of, idiomatic phrasing or cliche or something, it's nice to link in that vocabulary as you go further into the paragraph. It shows kind of continuity, and it just adds an extra little sort of spark, I suppose, to the piece. I just think it's a really nice way of doing it. So the use of the sheep, obviously at the beginning, then we are a generation of sheep, suggesting that we sort of just follow each other. We don't want to break out from the norm. We do whatever everyone else is doing, and then the opinion of the flock, as in everything is about being the same as the larger group. So I just thought the vocabulary side of things was quite nice. Also in the opening line, we've got this lovely quote. It's better to live a day as a lion than a lifetime as a sheep. Always nice to start with a quote. It hooks your reader, gets them thinking, maybe just gets them reflecting, or maybe just gets them to question things a little bit. So a really nice way of starting the introduction. Also absolutely vital is in this paragraph you should address the question. Otherwise it's all very nice having a nice quote, a nice language, but if you don't fully address what you're going to say in the rest of the essay, you lose structure and you lose your shape. So in this case the student does. The main line kind of in the middle there is people are not just influenced by what they read and hear, they are enslaved by it. So we're not just influenced, but we're actually fully, it controls us pretty much. And that we're a generation of sheep who follow the volatile and ever vacillating opinion of the flock. So this opinion, this student is kind of taking a fairly serious and fairly harsh kind of stance and saying that, you know, generally people aren't just slightly impacted or slightly influenced by media and by social media, but we're very much controlled by it. Okay, and here's why. So we're going to look at the two main arguments. So into the main body of the essay then. Really important to structure your ideas. The two main ideas that this student is looking at is originality and individuality is the first part, and, you know, the ability to be making your own decisions and be unique and maybe be a little bit different from the crowd. And then the second one is this idea of propaganda and how we are influenced by social media in a broader sense as a society. So really important things to remember: organize your points. So that's exactly what we've done here. We've decided on two main ideas or areas, and that's how we're going to break down our essay. We're going to link from one point to the next. So it's, you know, you finish one paragraph, it's always nice to have maybe a good link into the next paragraph. And always keep the question in mind. So always keep in mind, what is your purpose? Who am I writing this for? What's my genre? Keep that in mind. So remember that gap, mind the gap. Okay, so into the first main point is about originality. Okay, and again, really nice use of very emotive and very evocative language. And what I mean by that is any sorts of language that kind of inspires a response in you. So it's not just saying that something is difficult or something is sad or something is happy, that you're saying it's corrupting and worrying, that there's fear and there's an insatiable desire. These are all really strong descriptive words, and they certainly evoke a response in the reader. So it helps to really emphasize your point and to kind of really dramatize it a bit as well. And it is what you're trying to do. We're trying to say this is a corrupt, the world has been corrupted, and it's worrying how much we can't be original and we can't be individual anymore. Vocabulary, then again, we already mentioned the first paragraph, hugely important in those language marks as well. Remember that your language marks are 30% of what you're being marked out of. So vocabulary, again, like I mentioned with the sheep earlier, another nice way here is the kind of the river vocabulary. So when we talk about being drowned, we don't mean literally. It's sort of a figurative way of saying that maybe people are overwhelmed. They're drowned by the floods. But in a nice way, this student has kind of then linked that with another use of a sort of a river or water kind of metaphor, and talked about being carried downstream. Again, being like brought along or being influenced. So it's just sometimes nice to kind of group vocabulary together. Just like the sheep earlier, now we've got the sort of the water, the river kind of vocabulary, and linking in these little phrases just really adds something a bit. It just adds more to it, and it really reads fluently and in a rich way. Finally, then there's a relevant kind of reference or quote. So sometimes you might want to, we had a quote at the beginning as a hook, but you might want to put in something, that you think is relevant. Don't just quote for the sake of it, just because you liked a nice quote from your poem, you wanted to shove it in. It has to be relevant. And maybe this student had studied Yeats, for her paper 2, or for his paper 2. And this was, just a really nice way of kind of, well, I have that learned off, and actually it really works here. So there's a nice quote here from Yeats: "A terrible beauty is born. All's changed utterly." So talking about how the world has changed, and this is based on the influence of, say, social media and of the internet in general, and of the media, because that's what the question was all about. So a nice use of this quote, but like I said, don't just throw it in for the sake of it. Okay, into the next point then is propaganda. What I would say here would be really nice to see a better link between the previous paragraph and into this next one. In fact, this one it sort of starts fresh again. It's the harsh and quite frankly disarming reality of social media is that it is modern day propaganda. So it's like a whole brand new point. There's nothing really linking the two, which is a little bit of a shame. So I would like to see that. Again, really emotive and persuasive language. So the harsh and disarming reality. So that's something that's pandemonium, means it's total chaos and it's all over the place. And again, how we are enslaved by what we read and hear. So it's not just that we slightly take it on board or we're influenced by it, but it fully controls us. We are enslaved by it. Really strong language there, really hammers home the point. Again, you want to engage your reader, maybe like a rhetorical question. There's a nice one here. But if this is also true, why hasn't there been a revolution or at least a riot? ? So again, a rhetorical question, meaning you're not looking for an answer, but you're trying to stir up something in your reader or maybe get them to think. So it's not a specific answer to a question. It's just getting you to reflect and ponder a little bit. And again, more relevant. Last time we had the relevant quote, but now we have sort of relevant and topical events. So references to current affairs or things that are happening. So for example, gay rights in Iran or fracking in Canada. So again, making sure that this isn't just very broad general social commentary on the state of the world, bringing in things specifically that are happening, help the reader sort of relate to it a little bit more, and it kind of grounds your point and gives it strong examples, and really sort of adds that grounding to what you're trying to say, basically. Then we move into the conclusion. Like we said, it's shorter than the composition. It's only 50 marks. So the conclusion is fairly short. But again, it does its job and it kind of rounds things off nicely. And again, the first word, we must break free. Again, it's a very strong statement. We must break free. It's very kind of dramatic as well, but it is serious and it's showing how heavily influenced, I suppose, we are. And this we is this inclusive language, which is a lovely feature of persuasive writing, like in your opinion piece or maybe even in a speech or something like that. And then we have the emotive language again. We are in dire need of attention. So it's not just like, oh, things aren't great. It's, oh, we are in dire need, as in things are really, really bad. So again, it's just showing the seriousness of this topic. Okay, and finally, a nice little quotation to end with. Like I said, if you've got one that works, great. Don't just throw one in for the sake of it. This one is quite a nice one. It's from Theodore Roosevelt, and it's in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing. Really nice way to round off the piece. And like I said, it is an opinion piece, so you really want to try to bring in these kinds of features like inclusive language, emotive language, quotation, because it really just hammers home your point, and that's exactly what you're trying to do. So that brings us to the end. So for the full annotated version and the PDF version, you can go to studyclix.ie.